Welcome back to Unbreakable Alliances, the podcast where we explore how to build trust-based relationships that transform your life. I'm Dreeke, retired FBI agent and behavioral analyst and veteran Marine, sharing insights from my book, Unbreakable Alliances. We've covered the power of allies, trust, and communication in episodes 1 through 3. Today, episode 4 dives into chapter 4, Inspire, moving beyond influence and persuasion. Inspiring others is the key to forging unbreakable alliances, and I'm excited to answer your questions about how to do it authentically, and so let's get started. All right, so let's kick things off with a big one. Robin, how is inspiration different from influence and persuasion, and why does it matter for alliances? Over the years, I have become so hyper aware of words, and it's not just the meaning of the words to the person we're engaging with, but also the meaning of the words that they are to us. I remember many years ago when I took over the behavioral analysis program, we used to have a methodology for strategizing all our human engagements, our recruitment operations, double agent operations, interviews, and all the hoogie spooky spy stuff. And we used words, I remember, like talk in terms and use their vulnerabilities, or they were always referring to the individual we're going to be engaging as the subject or target of an investigation. And I remember just those words alone. I mean, just think about that. If you are thinking and know that the person you're engaging with, that's engaging you, thinks of you as a target rather than who you are, do you think they're objectifying you in some way? And also, the person, me, the one who's engaging you, do you think that's going to be leaking out from me about how I'm speaking to you, how I'm regarding you, both verbally and non-verbally, if I'm thinking of you as a target or a subject of an investigation, and I'm thinking about using levers of your vulnerabilities against you in some way? Absolutely. So it is so critical to think in terms of not just the words that we want to share with others and how they're received by others, but also the impact they have on us, the words we're using and how we regard others, because it's always about them. It's how do we inspire someone to feel safe with us? And so let's get back to that word persuasion, influence, and inspire. Many, many years ago, on one of my first recruitment operations, we had recruited a great Russian spy, to put it bluntly, and he had said something pretty profound to me. I remember I came to him with a list of questions of things we needed to know, and I said, hey, here's what we need to know, and he was a little resistant to share something. And so I started thinking in terms of how can I use this tactic and try to say, well, if we talk about this, I might be able to do this for you. In other words, I was thinking in words of trying to convince him to share this information that he might not even have. And I remember he said, hey, Robin, slow down. You're a good guy. I like you. I decided to cooperate with you and your organization, but let's get something very, very clear and straight. You are not going to convince me of anything I do not want to do. So unless you can share with me how it's in my best interests and how this is furthering the things I'm trying to do together with you, then let's move on to a different topic. In other words, he told me, don't even try to influence me, don't persuade me, don't try to convince me, it's not going to work. How can you inspire me to want to? I had to be able to ask these questions and talk in terms of how it aligned with what his goals and priorities are. In other words, how do I make that question, how do I make that ask all about him? And so that set me on a course to really think deep and hard about the impact of those words. And how do we make it all about someone else other than ourselves? So let's start with the easy one, the word manipulation. The word manipulation has very negative connotations when it comes to being used in terms of us versus the other person. We are using manipulation if we want to control the other person's actions, deeds, thoughts, information they provide in a covert way because we want to manipulate them. Also, that's all about me. And so then I think about the other words people generally try to use. The other word people use often, I just mentioned it before, is the word convince. Convince is about me and what I want. And remember, where's the whole focus got to be? It's got to be about the other person. Remember, the 4 keys of communication are about how to shift the language from ourselves to the other person. Make it about that other person, because as this great Russian defector told me, you cannot convince me of anything I have not already decided to do. You might be able to unlock an idea in my mind that was deeply rooted, that I didn't even know was there through a great conversation, great dialogue. But if it doesn't come from within me, I'm not going to do it. And so that's why convince doesn't work. Next, I started thinking hard because people love using that word influence or persuade. I mean, the book Influence by Robert Cialdini is a great book on all the levers of influence. And just think in terms of those words I'm using. Levers of influence. Now, granted, they caveat it in these beautiful words, ethical influence. And you have to have a pure heart and you have to have good intentions. That makes influence okay. I'm not saying it's okay, not okay, good or bad. I'm just telling you, think about where the focus is. If you're thinking in terms of trying to influence someone, influence them to do what? Something I want or something they want? An action I think is in their best interest or something they think's in their best interest? Where's the focus? The focus is on me. Me. When you are working at the highest levels of protecting the national security of the United States, NATO allies, and really the world at large, little things make a big difference. I like the word inspire. The way I think of this word inspire is inspiration comes from within the other person. So when I'm dialoguing, when I'm using the great keys of communication, when I'm communicating in terms of the challenges, priorities, and life goals of the other person, what I'm attempting to do is communicating in terms of them, what they're trying to achieve, and ask questions that they will come to conclusions and ideas on their own, the path that they choose to walk down, hopefully with resources and making a choice to accept the resources I'm offering in terms of what they've decided to do. Inspiration comes from within the other person. So every time I'm talking, dialoguing, engaging, and interacting, I don't think of manipulation. I don't think of convincing. I don't think of persuasion or influence. I'm thinking about what can I do to inspire them. And we've all heard this all the time about he or she is such an inspirational leader. What's that really mean? An inspirational leader is someone that unlocks the greatness from within the other person so they can move together down towards a common goal. That's why the word inspiration means so much more to me than the word influence or persuade, and definitely more than manipulation or convince. Here's a question I love. Robin, how do the 4 keys to communication help us inspire others? And can I share an FBI example? Yeah, so first of all, those 4 keys are the arc for absolutely everything I do and every interaction I have is my check and balances to ensure that the focus is on the other person and not me. So let's review them again really quickly. 1, seek the thoughts and opinions of others instead of going on and on about our own. 2, and this is the key one for inspiration, is talk in terms of their challenges, their priorities, their pain points and friction points in life instead of ours. In other words, when I want to inspire someone, I'm thinking in terms of what can I do to be a resource for their priorities, their goals and objectives and friction points, rather than trying to influence or persuade them to do what I want them to do. 3, the bedrock of all, non-judgmental active curiosity. And 4, empower people with choice, which is a big key when you want to inspire someone for action. You then empower them with choice about if they feel safe moving forward together with you as a resource for those things, with those great behaviors of trust, of open, honest communication, transparency, and vulnerability, and most importantly in these cases, competence. Here's a fun, quick example of me using those 4 keys in terms of inspiring a potential recruitment instead of trying to convince or persuade. I had a great potential spy recruitment lined up that another confidential human source of mine had really brought along well into the process of doing a little side business. Give you a little background here. So I had a known intelligence officer that was going to a university and had recruited a student at a university to provide some research and data and details to provide some intelligence for gaps that that country had. What we had done was we had the student had inspired the intelligence officer to understand that what she was doing for him and researching him and getting paid by this intelligence officer was also doing for another friend of hers, me. She didn't identify me as FBI, but she identified me as a friend that was actually interested in her doing research and his particular area of expertise in the world, in Europe, and the Russian region for investors. And so what she then did was she said, hey, I'm graduating from school and I'm going to be moving on. And my friend is looking for someone to take my place. I was doing a lot of work for him and getting paid pretty well on the side. And she said, would you like to meet my friend, Robin, that might be able to do the same for you? So what she did was, one of his priorities was to make some cash on the side to be able to provide some extra things for his family. So that's a goal, objective, and priority. She then sensitized him towards the fact that she was doing that for me. She then empowered him with choice about whether he wanted to be introduced to me or not. She didn't say, you need to meet my friend Robin. He wants to do this with you. No, no, no. That's about convincing, persuasion, and influence. She inspired him to think about it by saying, hey, here's what I'm doing, offering it in terms of his priorities. If you're comfortable with it, would you like to meet my friend Robin? He actually said, yes, I'd like to meet Robin. And so here's what I did to, again, thinking in terms of inspiration versus persuade, influence, or manipulate, or even convince. When we finally got together, arranged by my friend, so we had a transfer of trust for a cup of coffee. At this cup of coffee, I said, Sergey, it's great to meet you. My friend said such beautiful, wonderful things about you. And so here's what I have. I'm curious. She had said that you were interested in maybe some work on the side for researchers like myself that are looking for some ground truth in your area of the world, for investors, both from the government investors as well as private sector investors that are looking for some intelligence and ground truth so that people feel a little more safe and secure investing in this part of the world. Is that something that I was accurate in assessing that she relayed to me? In other words, seeking his thoughts and opinions, talking in terms of what was identified as his priorities, using his exact statements and reflecting them back at him so he's more likely to agree because they're actually his words. And then I empowered him with choice about if that was correct or not. He then responded, yes, that's exactly right. I said, I'm glad to hear that. So Sergey, here's what I have to offer. If this sounds good to you, the word if is a great way to empower with choice. It's one of those 4 keys. I said, I actually have some government people that are related to the U.S. government that actually have some information gaps that I think you're in a good position to provide information for. They're able to compensate generally pretty good and much better than the U.S. private sector people. But at the same time, I also have individuals from the private sector that also have some requirements for ground truth that I think you'd be an expert in. And they can provide some questions and they provide compensation as well. Out of those 2 areas, what do you think you might be more comfortable taking a look at? Powered him with choice, made his choice, moved forward. That's what inspiration is, about using those 4 keys of communication, talked in terms of his challenges, his priorities, gave him some options, and empowered him with choice. All right, here's our next one. I often get asked, Robin, how can we embrace diversity to inspire our allies? All right, so diversity is powerful, and here's how I actually started leveraging it. My behavioral team in the FBI. So we would get a case agent would contact myself or my assistant, and we would then start assembling a team for what the case agent needed. And typically a case agent would need, as I've said before, a recruitment operation, double agent operation, interview strategy, false flag strategy, anything that dealt with human interactions on the counterintelligence, hooky spooky spy stuff. And when I assembled a team of at least 3 case agents and 1 operational psychologist to go on site, listen to the case agent, gather information about the people involved so we could put a strategy together to produce trust between all these players and ultimately between the individual they wanted to have a contact with, I tried to assemble both subject matter experts on the technique and the individual that we're going to be trying to strategize a conversation with, but also multiple backgrounds and diversity on the team members themselves. So because each of them brought a different optic, whether it was because they come from another region in the country, whether it was because different genders involved, orientations, ethnicities, you name it. The most diversity I could bring on that team for that consultation, the better the result was when we actually put our heads together and came up with strategies from all these different optics. It came down to high energy, low energy, everything that was possibly applicable to human engagement with this myriads of different contexts, whether it's a social status, economic status, socio anything status. It was just amazing when I had the more diverse team focused on a singular mission of creating great, healthy, strong trust and alliances. We ensued a much better result. So Diversity is extremely powerful when forging unbreakable alliances. All right, moving right along to number 4, and here's a great one. This is a hot topic for me. Robin, how do we persuade ethically without crossing into manipulation? I covered this one a little bit already, but I'm going to do a little bit of a deeper dive here. Persuading ethically. I 100% believe, from my experiences, my background, because I'm so granular in wanting to put that best foot forward in making sure that the entire conversation, the entire engagement is about that other person when such high stakes are involved, that I do not believe in using word modifiers like ethically before a self-serving word like persuade, manipulate, or even leadership. To me, leadership's leadership. Leadership should be about the other person. You shouldn't say ethical leadership. It should be ethical because it's leadership. So using a word modifier for me like ethically before a self-serving word like convincing, like ethically convincing someone to do this. No, it's still self-serving. I think the word ethically is thrown in there to make us feel better and rationalize our behaviors that we're going to be self-centered. Own it. But if you are planning on being self-centered, it's okay. It's just the way the world works sometimes. Own it. Say it. Don't try to modify it with the word ethically. And I know people might get a little upset by that, but I'm just telling you, it's just the way it is as a cause and effect. Because think about this. Now reverse it. I love doing these reversals. If you feel from your context, your perception that someone's trying to take advantage of you because they're making it all about them, and they're doing so, and here's the key, with some subterfuge and a lack of transparency, and you call them out on it, say, hey, Steve, I'm getting a sense that you're kind of trying to take advantage of me here. What's going on? I feel like you're trying to convince me to do something that I might not feel is kind of in my best interest. What's going on, Steve? And he responds with, oh, yeah, Robin, well, I am using what I just learned, some persuasion influence techniques, but I'm doing it so ethically. Does that make you feel better? Does that make you feel like it's all about you? Or to you, does it seem like he's rationalizing his behavior for engaging with you in a way in which he wins and he's keeping that little subterfuge from you? That's what I mean. So always reversing. So in all these situations that you think you're going to rationalize your behavior to feel good about what you're doing, that's fine. But reverse it as if you're the person on the receiving end of someone saying that to you, that what they're doing, and ask yourself, is that actually true, and does that work or no? So going down the road further, how do you deal with this and how do you persuade ethically? Well, first of all, you don't. I think if you're going to persuade and you're going to influence and you're going to convince people to do something, to me, it's self-serving. And that's fine. Just state it. Because here's the bottom line to me. Be transparent. That's easy. Transparency to me is the greatest mitigator of all of this. You don't have to use the word ethically before you use a self-serving word or self-serving action if you just are transparent. If you're using skills, tools, and tactics to be as much about the other person as you can and to win and to gain an advantage, okay, sometimes we have to do that. Just state it. Because think about this. If you actually had established great trust and great rapport with someone, and you built a reservoir, as Jocko Willink and Leif Babin talk about in both extreme ownership and dichotomy leadership, if you built a great reservoir of good faith, of trust with someone, and you have an ask where you are hoping to inspire someone to take an action, share some information, or give a little bit more than you're willing or able to give in this moment, if you have that reservoir of goodwill, they're going to give it. And you don't need to use persuasion. You don't need to use influence. You don't need to put the word ethically in front of it because you can just ask the great healthy relationship that you have for a favor. People will throw that word ethically in front of these things too if it's more transactional. Think about this. Have you ever had to think in terms of, I'm going to use ethical persuasion on someone you actually have a strong, long-standing relationship with? No. You can just ask because you have trust, you have rapport, you have great levels of transparency, you're open, honest with your communication, and you just ask. These tactics and strategies for the short transactional relationships where you're going to use ethical persuasion is great, because what is ethical really saying? So now I'll go on to the positive side of this. Ethical persuasion is merely saying that what's in my heart and soul when I'm using these tools and techniques, I'm doing the best I can to be benevolent with what I'm doing. I'm doing it for a greater good. I'm doing it for the benefit of others. And so, great. That's what you're doing. And if it's going to be transactional, if you need to say those things to yourself and the team around you, because it's a transactional relationship, and you don't have time in these moments to have long-standing rapport and relationships and trust, great. Again, there's no right or wrong, pure cause and effect. I am on the side where I do not do, in general, transactional relationships. I understand that patience and time are what are required for long-standing success in any endeavor you're placing yourself in that you want to do. All right, number 5, moving right along. This is a fun one for me. This comes up a lot. Robin, how can emotional intelligence help us inspire others, and what's a practical tip? There's, as I've said before on the other episode, there's 5 elements of emotional intelligence, and we've covered one already before. We're going to cover this one right now, the one on emotional regulation. And what I mean by that is I'm chuckling because I do a lot of true crime podcasts, and when dealing with people that are the subject of true crime and they've done horrendous, unhealthy things to other human beings, whether it's take advantage of them, murder them, assault them, rob from them, you name it, you are dealing with someone with what I call a broken, crazy brain. That's my technical term for it. And so crazy brain to me it's the lack of ability for emotional regulation. They go from 0 to 100. Their emotional, non-cognitive, non-thinking lower brain is engaged. And so applying this to the world of creating allies and trust, think about this. Do another thought experiment. If you are dealing with one of life's most challenging issues, or heck, just dealing with a daily issue, and you have someone in your life and you share what's going on and you're seeking help, guidance, and as a resource from the people around you, if you have someone, say you have a choice of 2 people. The one person, they have an arc in life reps of every time something goes a little wrong, a little awry, and a little into chaos, they freak out. They get highly emotional. They either start screaming, yelling, crying, ranting, raging, moaning and complaining, playing the victim card, wound collecting, I don't care what it is. When their emotional brain kicks in, they just kind of lose it for a little bit or a lot of it. That's choice 1 when you have a challenge or a problem in life. You're seeking some guidance and a loving critic. And then you have your other friend over here, or contact or associate. As soon as you share with them the same exact scenario, or maybe they're both in the same conversation and they hear you, and this other friend and associate looks at you and goes, all right, this looks like it's a challenge. Who should we call first? What is it you're trying to achieve? What do you want to accomplish in the end? What do you think caused it? What might we do to mitigate it? What relationships don't we have now that we might need to make some phone calls and invigorate and foster so that we can move through this challenge, make it a great experience, learn from it, and move on? That's someone who is self-regulated, pragmatic, objective, and a problem solver. So you have someone losing their crap because they got crazy brain engaged, and you have the problem solver. Which are you going to choose? Who do you want to make an alliance with? This has nothing to do with whether you like someone or don't like someone. No, this actually comes down to trust as well. Who do you trust to let into your life to solve that problem? This person is a problem solver. They're there for me. They're being a resource for me. They're helping me work the problem. This person over here, I might like them. Hell, they might be family members. They might be closer. Who knows? But they lose their brains every time a problem happens. Can I trust them to help me work this problem? So that is the power and the crucial elements of emotional regulation when dealing with emotional intelligence in those 5 factors. No crazy brain. All right, here's a great, powerful, and actually a very wonderful tool in our next step to forging unbreakable alliances. So here we go. Here's a favorite. Robin, how have you used storytelling to inspire someone? Oh my gosh, we use storytelling all the time. Not just me, but all of us. So as human beings, our evolution came about because we became storytellers. Matter of fact, a great book called Sapiens by Noah Harari talks about us as a species evolved from the other primates because we had the ability to gossip. The ability to gossip, to tell stories, to tell fables that pass on knowledge to others, word fame, all the things we've heard about in the movies and from Vikings and all the ancient lore. It all came down from our ability to storytell. And there's a couple really good ways and reasons why we do storytell and actually what it can do for our alliances. First of all, storytelling allows us to relate. It allows us to identify commonalities with other people. It allows us to take complex ideas and break them down so that more people can understand them. Heck, I dealt with very, very intelligent people that I was recruiting. I dealt with people that had a lot of technical knowledge in areas I had no idea about. If they didn't have the ability to storytell at some level with me, to explain in my small brain way what exactly they were doing, what exactly the capabilities were, and all these nuances and granularity, they're going to lose me, and I had no idea what they were talking about. So our ability to do that is really important. Matter of fact, some of the great books I've read by, whether it's Robert Greene's books on laws of human nature, we have Ryan Holiday's books on stoicism. You also, Robert Cialdini wrote Influence. He's a scientist. There's a lot of, Joe Navarro. Joe Navarro is a scientist in the area of nonverbal behavior. But each one of these books has anecdote after anecdote of all these people in history, stories, tales, examples of people using these complex human interpersonal skills in a way that I can understand and the other people in our audience can understand because it makes it relatable. So that's one reason for it. Here's another reason for it and how I use it throughout my career and still do when I'm either doing a speaking event, a talking event. When I was presenting information to case agents, we called it suggestions and points to consider after my behavioral team did an assessment. Sometimes we would tell stories of our own cases, our own examples of using that same kind of skills, tools, and techniques that we had put together for them in a real life example. For one, it gave them courage to try it. It gave an example of its success from the past. That's a good reason. And here's another reason why we storytell. Because for the audience, it'll do a couple things. So let's go back and take a look at, recall what the behaviors of trust are. Open, honest communication, transparency, vulnerability. When you do those three things, you're demonstrating to the other person that you're empower them with choice about how to see you with lots of transparency and openness, because when people have situational awareness of who you are, your strengths and your faults, and your willingness and openness to share them, it allows them to feel safe. Think about the stories I've told you all and shared with you all in the podcast. Some, matter of fact, almost all of them started out with, hey, here's what happened. Here's what I was going for. Here's where I kind of stumbled along the way. Here's what I learned, and here's how I moved forward, and now I'm presenting you this. I'm very transparent. I'm very open. I try to be as least insecure as possible because that empowers people with choice. It gives you transparency on who I am, so you can make the choice of whether this content is valuable or not valuable for you. And you trust that actually I field tested it, I experimented with it, I made it better, I make it my own. And in the world of mastery, I fall in love with the process of doing the most important things. Having confidence in the content I do know well, and having the humility to know I'm a student every single day. Moving right along, number 7, let's tackle this. Robin, how do we tailor our approach to inspire different people? Every time we did a behavioral assessment with my team, and I'll give you one example in particular. So we go out to a office in the Detroit area, and it was a small office, and this office had put out a request because they wanted to have some behavioral assessment on a individual they need to have an interview with. And this individual had been, I think it was in touch, we think, with the government of Iran. It's either a professor or student at one of the universities out in the Detroit area. And the case agent requested us to come in for a strategy for the interview and trying to recruit this individual. When we got to the office, the first question we always ask is, hey, what's your objective? What are you trying to achieve? And the case agent starts telling us about the objective of the case, which is recruit this individual. And I said, all right, before we move any further, help me understand, when you say recruit, what do you mean recruit? What are your goals, missions, and objectives? Are you trying to have an ongoing relationship, or is this just an interview strategy? So part of this is understanding what the actual words that they're requesting, what that actually meant to the individual making the request. So we have lots of transparency and clarity. The second thing we then asked was, all right, so let me hear about the individual you plan on engaging. And while I'm listening to the individual, the case agent who's sharing the information about this individual, I could hear the disdain they had for this individual coming right out of their mouth. Their nonverbals, every time they said yes, and this person, they came from this country and they came here to study. I mean, look at my nonverbals. They had a little disgust, nonverbals in the nose, their little compression. They're kind of sneering a little bit. Every now and then, not a lot, but they're having some leakage of being particularly keen on the individual that they said they wanted to recruit. And so it was a challenge because this case agent said that they wanted to be the one to do the interview and do the recruitment. Because again, one of the questions we have is, hey, tell me about the team. Tell me about the support you have from management. Tell me about the people involved in this operation so we could start tailoring our approach for the request, for the individual, for this human engagement. And so this case agent said that they were planning on doing it themselves. So we're listening to all this. We're hearing the case agent have all this leakage of their disdain that they had. You can kind of sense that it's going to be a little bit of a mess here, a little bit of a sticky situation. So how do you tailor that for the individual? So told the case agent, all right, thank you for all the information. We're done talking now. We're going to collaborate as a team and come up with strategies and suggestions for you. And we sat down as a team, and the first thing we said to each other was, that guy cannot do the recruitment pitch. This guy cannot be involved in any way with a one-on-one interaction with the person you're trying to recruit. Because sometimes it's a hard truth. Sometimes you might not be the best person to do the job. You have to have the humility. You have to have the humbleness to say, it's okay, I need to pass the torch here because I'm too emotionally invested, I'm too emotionally hijacked, I have too much emotional negativity towards the individual or the situation, and I cannot be objective enough and I cannot execute what we need to execute. So we had to do a couple things here. We had to tailor our approach to the case agent to present it in a way that says, you're not the best person to do this. At the same time, we needed to then tailor our approach to the individual they wanted to recruit. So that's a large chance of success as well. I remember we went to the case agent and we strategized how to present to the case agent, we didn't say what you couldn't do, because remember, these are suggestions to point and consider, because we could tell that this individual, this case agent, was kind of hypersensitive, maybe a little insecure, so he might take a front and get defensive and not listen to our suggestions if we said you're not the person for the job. We merely stated as, hey, what a great opportunity you have and what a great team around you have. And part of what we do as a team is we assess the best path forward based on our research, based on our observations for success for the operation. And whereas you're a likely and the amazing candidate because your background knowledge of the individual and all these things, our psychologist says the best suggestion here is actually your co-case agent. I said, what a great opportunity that actually these two can actually talk as they start moving down the path together through commonality to establish some rapport, maybe establish some trust, and hopefully bring them on board so they can collaborate together and protect national security of the United States, NATO allies, and each other. So that's the way we presented it. We presented it not on what you shouldn't do or couldn't do. We presented what a great opportunity because you have such an amazing resource with such an amazing match that's actually backed with science. So tailoring the approach of individuals, like it, leave it. That's exactly what you have to do sometimes. And it actually worked out very, very well. That is how we can tailor the approach to the individual in every single aspect in the realm. Take in the context of everyone involved, present ideas in a way that it's in their best interests, and empower them with choice about how they want to move forward. And just give cause and effect of every behavior. All right, here's the last and final question I love. Robin, what's a common mistake in inspiring others and how do we avoid it? Oh, there's so many common mistakes we make when we do this thing. And I wrote a few down to try to jog my memory here. First common mistake we make is if we're trying to convince someone to do something. That is the worst thing we can try to do. Actually, manipulation is part of that. Anything where we're having a lack of transparency when engaging another human being, that's just fraught with bad things about to happen. Not maintaining emotional stability when engaging people is another one. We talked about that one. Self-regulation is huge. You want to definitely come across as a confident problem solver, but with the humility knowing that we're not perfect. And that's the other aspect of this. Do not pretend to be perfect. You're not. No one is. And people that try to give that front that they are destroy trust, and they break bonds that might have already been established because no one is perfect. No one expects you to be perfect. What they're looking for is what I tell my kids all the time. They're looking for great positive energy. They're looking for you to inspire them to feel safe. And they're looking for you to have the humility to be a great student and a great mentor and put those two things together when you're engaging other human beings. Another thing we can do is be present. People will often fall into traps when you're about to do a big meeting and a big engagement with someone, and that is they try to script it out. They try to rehearse it. They try to do all these things that we're talking about as skills, tools, and tactics, and they become so focused on what they think they should be doing and what they think they should be saying and following a script they put together, as beautiful as it might be. But every time you're focused on what you're doing, you're missing what they're actually saying and what they're actually doing. And so being present is engaging another human being free of an agenda. Listen to their words, become actively curious about what they're saying, not what you want to say, not what you want to interject. So that's a few of the common mistakes that can avoid the pitfalls of not inspiring someone. Here's another one. Guessing at the priorities, objectives, and pain points of others rather than actually knowing them. We've all experienced this. You can have the same methodology for engaging every human being at work or at home or wherever, and we inevitably have success with one person, failure with another, success, failure, and we're always reflecting saying, what did I do? It worked with this person, but over here it completely failed. You know why? Because you, by chance, happen to talk in terms of the priorities, challenges, and pain points of this person because you guessed right. And you guessed wrong over here, wrong here, wrong here, right here. You're all over the place because you were guessing at what these things were rather than actually being actively curious and discovering what they were. So be present, be authentic, which means you are transparent, and just genuinely find out what those things are so you can speak in terms of them, so you can offer yourself as a resource when appropriate in terms of those things, and never, ever, ever push the tempo of the speed of the relationship and how it develops that they're looking for according to what you're looking for. That is the most off-putting thing you could potentially do, is push the tempo. And the final thing I'm going to say, as I've said a million times already, and I'm going to keep saying that in multiple episodes, I'm sure, when in doubt, be transparent. If you're having a hard time inspiring others or overcoming any kind of skepticism they have, own it, be transparent, then empower them with choice about whether they want to move forward together with you or not. And then accept their answer. Whatever it is, good, bad, or indifferent, honor them, honor the situation, and allow them to be who they are, making decisions that they want to do, and whether they want to move forward with you or not. Then you can reflect and get better. Put in a great rep. All right, that's it, folks. We've explored how to inspire others today, from embracing diversity to crafting compelling stories. I hope you're ready to inspire your alliances authentically. Next time in episode 5, we'll dive into chapter 5, Own It, Tackling Conflict Resolution. Now, don't forget to subscribe, drop your questions in the comments below, like it, and visit me at robindreeke.com to keep this conversation going. Thanks for joining me. Be safe and keep charging hard.